Alrighty, in this lesson, I'd like to give you a basic understanding about color, right? And when I say basic, I really mean basic, but that's okay. Let's begin at the beginning. Everybody has seen something like this, right? This is a color wheel, and this is the color wheel that has the primary colors in it of red, yellow, and blue. They're called primaries because you can't take two other colors and mix them in order to make one of these colors. So in other words, there are no two colors that you can mix together to get yellow, or to get red, or to get blue. So if you do take these primary colors, though, you can mix them together and get what are called the secondary colors. The secondary colors are orange, green, and purple, and you get them when you mix the primaries. So for instance, red and yellow makes orange. Red and blue makes purple. Blue and yellow makes green. Now you can keep mixing and mixing and you would get what are called the tertiary colors. So a tertiary color is when you mix one of the primary colors with one of the secondary colors. So for instance, red and orange, and you get red-orange. Blue and green, and you get a blue-green. And this could go on forever and ever. There's something else about the color wheel that I wanted to show you besides just primaries, secondaries, and tertiaries, and it's this. When we look at the color wheel, we can also think of it in terms of warm and cool. So we have red, orange, and yellow. Those would be your warm colors. You'd have violet, blue, and green. Those would be your cool colors. Just think about them psychologically. These colors just feel warm. These colors just feel cool. And they're very useful to have that understanding because it's going to help you to mix colors. I'll show you that in just a second when we do the exercise. All right, so let's do the exercise, Mr. Coon. Okay. So here's an example of the finished exercise. And as you can see, I've got 4 color wheels. I've got 2 primaries and 2 secondaries. That'll be enough. Okay, so you can see on one of the color wheels I've labeled as warm, the other is cool. Warm, cool on the secondaries as well. And you might say like, but wait a minute, I saw the color wheel. It only had red, yellow, and blue. What's all this about the warm colors, right? Well, it just makes better secondaries and a better understanding if you understand warm and cool. So how do we get the warms and cools? So on the cool side of our primary colors, you would see what you'd probably call a yellow, right? And that would be more of what I'd call a lemon yellow, right? And the blue is an ultramarine blue. The red, though, that's going to be a little bit strange to you. That's actually a magenta. And you can see that this yellow here is tending more towards the green. This red here is tending more towards the purple. And the blue is also tending more towards the purple. Remember, those were our cooler colors. Okay, on the warm side over here, we've got the yellow is tending more towards the orange, right? And the blue is tending more towards the green. The red is also tending more towards the orange. So these were your warmer colors. Like I say, they're very, very helpful in mixing those secondary colors, browns, etc., right? And you can see here that our secondaries are very different. So we've got the magenta and the ultramarine makes a very different purple than the cyan and the cadmium red, which makes a very darker purple here. So the paints that we're going to be working with are temperas. Now, in the last lesson, you worked with watercolors, and the watercolors are what are considered to be transparent paints. In other words, you really see through them. The temperas are considered to be a semi-transparent or a semi-opaque. Transparent means that you can see through it. Opaque means that you can't see through it. Okay. And they've got a little bit more body to them, more than the watercolors, but less than, let's say, an oil paint. Okay. So how do we work with these? And let's see. If you looked closely, you'd see that the colors that I have on the color wheel don't necessarily match the labels that are on the tempera paints. So for instance, the lemon yellow is just, well, yellow, right? The magenta is, fortunately, magenta, but what I'm calling an ultramarine blue, they just call blue. Is it a true ultramarine blue? Not really, but it's close. It's close enough for what we're doing. It's definitely cooler than the turquoise, which I'm calling cyan. And I'm giving you these names because they're more appropriate to the higher levels of paint that you might work with in the future. And there are some things like, well, red is just, the cadmium red is red, but, and that was an easy one. But here, like this, for instance, this is just my own making because Crayola doesn't make, let's say, a cadmium yellow. So I just took some of the yellow, mixed it with magenta a little bit, and I get something that's kind of like a cadmium yellow. I mean, these are tempera paints after all. Okay, so, but it's preparing us for working with oils and other things. Okay, but that being said, there's a lot we can do with tempera paints. You're going to be amazed after we get past this lesson and really get into painting. Okay, enough of that. Let's get painting. So in the classroom, I have two worksheets. One is for primary colors, and you can see all the colors are listed here. And so then the second one is the secondary colors, and all the colors, once again, are listed there. We have one for warm and one for cool. Okay. If you weren't in the classroom, it'd be easy enough just to make up your own color wheels. Because the tempera is a water-based paint, and this is very thin paper that I'm using, just copy paper, I've gone ahead and I've taped everything down. All right, let's go ahead and begin. Here is my little palette, and it's got my various colors on it. Let's see if you know. Here would be your cool yellow, that'd be your lemon yellow. Here would be your warmer yellow, and that's your cadmium yellow. Here's your warmer blue, which I'd call cyan, but they're going to call turquoise. This would be your cooler blue, which I'd call an ultramarine, but they're going to call just blue. Cadmium red, kind of. And they're just going to call that red, and magenta is just magenta. I find a lot of people call that pink for some reason. I guess it looks kind of pink. Anyways, you'll notice no white or black. We're not dealing with that right now. We're keeping this really basic. Okay, so where would I begin? I would probably begin something like this. Oh, and by the way, you see this? Doesn't look like very much color. You know how much I'm going to use of this? Probably about 1%. So you can really put out very, very small amounts of paint. A little bit is going to go a really long ways. Okay. But anyways, I digress. So the lemon yellow, I'll start right here with the cool colors. Starting with my yellow, and a nice soft brush, probably a big brush. Easy peasy. And try and stay within the lines. Every time you pick up the brush, it's a chance to practice. So that made sense there. But you know what? I'm efficient. So since I've got both these taped down, I'm going to do this right now. Check this out. Okay. I'm going to take my yellow and I'm going to start this cool secondary wheel right here. I've already got the yellow on the brush. That makes sense, right? So why wash it off again? And I'm going to go all the way and do this whole top right here. So I'm doing the lemon yellow part, obviously, right? But I'm also doing the cool green and the cool orange. All right, well, why do you do it that way, Mr. Kuhn? Well, let me tell you. If you've noticed on the paintings, I often start like this. I will put one color down and then I'll mix another color into it to make that third color that I wanted. That's called mixing on canvas, right? It's much more efficient than mixing a color in your palette. We'll just call this our palette for right now. And oftentimes when people mix, they'll mix way too much. Let's say they're going to make a green. They'll get some blue there, and they'll get some yellow there. And then they wanted a little bit more yellow, and then a little bit more yellow. And it's just a mess. The only time that you'd want to mix a color ahead of time is when you want to use that color, keep that color as a flat color, right? Kind of like I did with my cadmium yellow right here that I mixed up a big quantity of it, right? Otherwise, for the most part, it's almost always best to mix on the canvas. Okay, so I've got that lemon yellow right there. So then the next thing I'm going to go into is, well, let's say my cool red, right? So in other words, my magenta right here. And so I'm going to go ahead. I've got that a little bit of yellow on the brush, and I'm going to mix into it. Now, here's a tip. Whenever you're mixing on the canvas, you want to take the color that is lightest and put that down first. In fact, whenever you're mixing paint, period, right? Let's say you're mixing up a batch of paint in the center here because you just needed to for some reason, right? Then you would still start with the paint that was the lightest in color and then mix into it. That's going to be the most efficient way, because you'll see that oftentimes it is just the tiniest amount of paint will change the color. So like there was a whole bunch of yellow, very little of this magenta to make this orange. And we've got that magenta right here. And guess what? I'm going to make purple, right? So I can put the magenta into there as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and use my ultramarine. That would be my cooler blue, right? And it's cooler because it's tending more towards the purple side of things. So now I've thoroughly cleaned my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and make my warm colors. So this time, instead of using the lemon yellow, I'll use the cadmium yellow. Down here, when I'm mixing my secondaries, just like before, I'm going to mix it all the way across. So now I'm going to use this cadmium red as my warm red. Just like before, I'm going to use my cadmium red, and I'm going to work into both the cadmium red area and my purple area. Now that I've got these two areas covered, I'm going to go ahead and work into the yellow and make my orange. And we're going to get a nice orange. And you can see the quality of this orange is a little bit different than that one. I'm going to use my warm blue, what I'm calling cyan blue. Green on there, and I'm going to go ahead and make my purple here. So with my cyan, just a little bit, mix that into this red, and let's see what happens. So you can see that the secondaries that we got are a little bit different. You really see it mostly in the purple, and that's because it's just so opposite, right? Orange and green, not so much, a little bit difference, right? But here's the difference maker here. Think about it for a second. If you've got this blue is tending towards yellow, this red is tending towards yellow, and what is opposite of yellow on the color wheel? It's purple. That's a complementary color. We'll get into that in a little bit. And so we've got this very dirty, very dark purple. On the other hand, we had this blue that was tending more towards the purple and the red that was tending more towards the purple, so very pure. And that's why we got this very pure color here in comparison to this much dirtier color here. Once again, that has to do with complements, and that is a topic for our next lesson.